My mother held my arm and whispered, "Please don't complicate this for the family," while asking me to approve the transfer in front of relatives. I smiled and signed. Months later, when she needed that approval reversed and all eyes turned to me, she looked away. That look, that single moment when her eyes couldn't find mine, that told me more than 20 years of living under the same roof ever did, because in that look was the truth she had been hiding from herself, that she knew. She always knew what she was asking me to give up. She just never expected consequences. My name is Eliza Monroe. I am 32 years old. I live in a small town about 40 minutes outside of Charleston, South Carolina. The kind of place where everyone knows your grandmother's maiden name and your father's church attendance record. The kind of place where reputation is currency, and silence is considered a virtue. For a long time, I believed that. If you're watching this from somewhere that understands what I mean, a town where you learned early to keep peace at any cost. Let me know in the comments what city you're from. I want to know who's listening. Let me take you back. I was the second child, the daughter, 5 years younger than my brother Jared, who came into this world with a certain kind of shine that never quite left him. He was handsome and quick and charming in a way that made teachers forgive late assignments and made my parents see leadership where others might have seen arrogance. Jared was the name people remembered, the one they asked about, the one who got full sentences at family gatherings while I got polite nods. I don't say this with bitterness, not anymore. I'm just telling you the water I swam in so you understand why I stayed under so long. My mother, Regina, was a woman who believed deeply in appearances. The lawn had to be cut on Saturdays. The Christmas cards had to go out by December 1st. The children had to be presentable, grateful, and above all, agreeable. She wasn't cruel. I want to be clear about that. She wasn't a monster. She was a product of her own mother's expectations and her own fears about what people might say. She loved us in the way she understood love, which was to make sure we never embarrassed her. My father passed when I was 16. Heart attack. Sudden, the kind that doesn't give you time to say anything. After that, my mother leaned harder into control. It was how she grieved. I understand that now. I understood it then too. That's part of why I forgave so much. But understanding someone doesn't mean you have to keep bleeding for them. After my father died, my grandfather, his father, became the center of our world. His name was William Monroe. He was 81 at the time, a retired contractor who had built the home we all grew up visiting. A pale blue farmhouse on 3.5 acres about 15 minutes outside of town. He'd built it with his own hands back in 1967, the year he married my grandmother. She passed 2 years before my father. Lung cancer. I was the one who drove her to treatments. When my father died, something shifted in Grandpa William. He became more aware of time, more deliberate with his words, and more attached to me, specifically, in a way that made my mother quietly uncomfortable. He told me once, sitting on that creaky porch swing he refused to replace, "Eliza, you're the only one who shows up without being asked. That means something." I didn't know then how much it meant. After high school, I went to community college nearby. I told myself it was practical, affordable, close to family. But looking back, I know the truth. Jared had already gone to Clemson on a partial scholarship. Someone needed to stay. Someone always needed to stay. And I was already good at being that someone. By the time I was 23, I was working part-time at the local library and spending the rest of my hours at Grandpa William's house. He had started showing signs of decline, small things at first, forgetting where he put his glasses, leaving the stove on, calling me by my grandmother's name. The doctors said it was early-stage dementia and that it would progress. They were right. For the next 6 years, I was his primary caregiver. Let me tell you what that looked like. It looked like getting up at 5 to check on him before my shift. It looked like meal prepping every Sunday. It looked like managing his medications, his doctor's appointments, his bills, his loneliness. It looked like sitting with him through the nights when he didn't recognize me and cried for people who had been dead for decades. It looked like holding his hand and telling him everything was okay when I wasn't sure it was. Jared visited once every few months, sometimes less. He had a real estate career building in Atlanta. He was doing well, he said. Busy, he said. He would send money occasionally, $100 here, $200 there, like he was tipping a service worker. My mother came by more often, but her visits were short and performative. She would bring flowers, take a photo for her social media, say things like, "Daddy, you're looking so good," and leave before anything hard happened. I was the one who cleaned up the accidents. I was the one who dealt with the wandering. I was the one who learned how to redirect his confusion without breaking down myself. And I was the one he looked at one evening, in a rare moment of perfect clarity, and said, "This house is yours, Eliza. I already told the lawyer. You've earned it." I didn't ask for that. I didn't expect it, but I believed him. And when the time came, I learned what belief costs when it isn't written in the right ink. Here's what you need to understand about my grandfather's estate. He had a will. He had written it years ago, and in it the house and the land were to be split between my father and his sister, my Aunt Carol. When my father passed, his share was supposed to go to his children, Jared and me, equally, but the will hadn't been updated. It still listed my father as the beneficiary, which meant probate, which meant delay, which meant opportunity. Grandpa William knew his mind was going. Somewhere in his fading awareness, he also knew that the legal document didn't say what he actually wanted. So he tried to fix it. He told my mother his wishes. He told his lawyer. He told me, over and over, in those small windows when his thoughts were his own. But he didn't put it on paper soon enough. When he was 89, his lucidity became rare. And in one of those moments, my mother arrived with a new document, a transfer of deed. It would move ownership of the house and land directly to Jared. I remember the afternoon with horrible precision. It was March. There were 6 family members in the living room, including Aunt Carol and 2 of her grown sons. There was a notary. There was coffee in the good mugs we only used for company. And my mother, standing beside Grandpa William's chair, smiling at me. The document was already signed by him, his shaky, uncertain signature, a signature that might not have held up in court if anyone had challenged it. But no one was going to challenge it, because the only person who might was me. And they needed me to witness. My mother walked over to where I was standing near the window. She looped her arm through mine, leaned in close, and whispered, "Please don't complicate this for the family." That was it. Not a request, not an explanation, a warning wrapped in softness. I looked around that room, at my aunt, who had never once called to ask how the caregiving was going, at my cousins who sent cards on holidays and otherwise forgot I existed, at Jared, who was standing near the doorway with his arms crossed, already looking like a man who owned the place, and at my grandfather, confused, tired, watching me with those cloudy eyes, not fully sure who I was. I smiled, and I signed. I told myself it didn't matter, that the house was just a building, that I didn't do it for reward, that family was more important than property. I told myself all the things you tell yourself when you're choosing peace over justice and calling it maturity. But none of that was true. I signed because I was tired, because I had been fighting invisible battles for years, and I didn't have the energy to fight a visible one. Because I believed, foolishly, that maybe if I just did this one thing, they would finally see me, finally appreciate me, finally say, "Thank you, Eliza, we see what you gave up." They didn't. 2 months later, Grandpa William passed in his sleep. I was there. I was holding his hand. Jared didn't arrive until the next morning. He said traffic was bad. After the funeral, things moved quickly. Jared brought in contractors before the flowers on the grave had wilted. He talked about modernizing the house, renting it out, maybe flipping it once the market turned. He treated it like a business asset, a line item. I said nothing. My mother told me, during a quiet moment in the kitchen, "You've always known this house belongs to the family. It's not about paperwork." She said it like she was reassuring me, like I should be comforted by the idea that ownership didn't matter. But she only said that because she wasn't the one who lost anything. Jared didn't just renovate. He leveraged. He used the property as collateral for a loan related to one of his real estate developments in Atlanta, a large loan, the kind you don't take unless you're certain or desperate. Jared was always a little of both. I didn't know the details then. I only learned them later, when everything started falling apart. 6 months after my grandfather's death, I was sitting in my apartment on a Tuesday evening when my mother called. Her voice was tight, controlled. She asked if I could come to her house for dinner that weekend. She said there was something we needed to discuss as a family. When I arrived, Jared was already there. So was a man I didn't recognize, later introduced as their attorney. The table was set, but no one was eating. What I learned in that room changed everything. Jared was under investigation. The loan he had secured using my grandfather's property had been part of a larger transaction involving insurance documentation, and some of those documents contained false information, overstated valuations, misrepresented ownership history, the kind of discrepancies that turn business deals into fraud cases. I don't fully understand all the financial details, and I won't pretend to. What I do understand is this. Jared had submitted paperwork claiming the property was unencumbered, when in fact there were questions about the original transfer, questions about my grandfather's mental capacity at the time of signing, questions about whether the deed was legally obtained. And now, those questions were being asked by investigators. The attorney explained that the family's best option was to present a unified front, to confirm that the transfer was legitimate, consensual, and witnessed by someone with direct knowledge of my grandfather's intentions. Someone like me. My mother looked at me with that smile again, that same smile from the living room. Eliza, you were there, you saw Daddy sign, you know he wanted this. And I thought about it. I really did. I thought about how easy it would be to nod, to say yes, to make this all go away. No one would blame me. No one would even know I'd had another choice. The room would relax. Jared would shake my hand. My mother would say something like, "See, we're still a family." I could leave. I could let the lie continue. I could walk away and never look back. There's a version of me that almost did. That night, after the meeting, I drove out to the old farmhouse. It was dark, empty. Jared hadn't moved in, he just owned it. I sat in my car in the driveway and stared at the porch where I used to sit with my grandfather. The porch where he told me I was the only one who showed up. I cried. I won't pretend I didn't. I sat there, and I let myself feel all of it. The grief, the anger, the years of invisibility, the way they looked through me until they needed something from me. And I almost drove away. I almost decided that I didn't owe them the truth any more than they'd given it to me. I almost chose peace one more time, but I didn't. Because I remembered something. I remembered that a few months before he signed that document, my grandfather had given me a folder, a worn manila folder filled with papers he said were important. I hadn't looked at them closely. I just put them in a box with other keepsakes. But that night, I went home, and I found that folder. Inside was a copy of his original will. Inside were handwritten letters, addressed to me, where he explained his wishes. Inside was a receipt from his attorney for a consultation about updating the will, a consultation that happened 2 months before my mother brought that transfer document. He had tried. He had tried to make it right, and someone had stopped him. If any part of this story is landing somewhere real for you, if you've ever been the one they overlooked until they needed you, take a second and like this video, just so I know I'm not alone in what I'm saying. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life, not because of what I did, but because of what I had to accept. I had to accept that my mother knew, that Jared knew, that the family I had sacrificed for had not only taken my inheritance, but had used my silence to protect themselves. I met with a lawyer, a real one who didn't answer to my mother or her money. I showed her the folder, I showed her the timeline, I showed her everything. She told me I had options, not easy ones, but real ones. The first option was to challenge the original deed transfer on the grounds of undue influence and incapacity. My grandfather had been diagnosed with dementia. The transfer was executed during a period where his cognitive state was documented as impaired, and I had letters in his handwriting that directly contradicted the action he supposedly agreed to. The second option was simpler and more devastating. In Jared's fraud investigation, the question of whether the deed was validly obtained was central to his defense. If I confirmed the transfer was legitimate, his case became stronger. If I didn't confirm it, if I simply told the truth, his defense would collapse. I wasn't the one who committed fraud. I wasn't the one who forged documents or lied to lenders, but I was the only living person who could say, under oath, whether my grandfather knew what he was signing. And I couldn't lie. I told my lawyer to proceed with both options. My mother called me 3 days later. She had heard, somehow, that I was asking questions, that I had hired representation. Her voice was cold. She said, "After everything we've done for you, you're going to tear this family apart over a house?" I let her finish. Then I said, "You're right. It's not about the house. It never was." And I hung up. Here's the part of the story where I could tell you my family came around, that Jared apologized, that my mother showed up at my door and admitted she was wrong, that we healed. That didn't happen. What happened was this. Jared's fraud case moved forward. Without my corroboration, his claim that the deed was cleanly obtained fell apart. The lender's attorneys dug deeper. They found inconsistencies in his other paperwork too. The insurance valuations, the timeline of ownership documentation, the statements he had made under oath. His real estate license was suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. His development deal in Atlanta collapsed. The property, my grandfather's property, was flagged in civil court as part of the fraud proceedings. And while all of this was happening, I filed my own case, a probate challenge, based on my grandfather's original will, based on his letters, based on the medical documentation of his cognitive state at the time the transfer was signed, based on my testimony about what he told me, in his own words, in his own home, in those rare clear moments. It took 11 months. 11 months of depositions, of court appearances, of my mother refusing to look at me in hallways, of Jared's attorney trying to paint me as bitter, jealous, unstable. They even suggested I had forged the letters, that I had manipulated my grandfather in his final years, that I had isolated him from the family. Let me tell you about that accusation. For a moment it worked. I watched the judge's face when Jared's lawyer made that argument. I saw the flicker of doubt. I saw him look at me differently, and I understood in that moment how easy it is to flip the story, to make the quiet one look suspicious, to turn care into control, to make the one who stayed the villain. And here's the thing. I understood why someone might believe it. From the outside, if you didn't know the full picture, you might look at me and wonder. You might think, maybe she did manipulate him. Maybe she was positioning herself all along. Maybe she's the one who can't be trusted. I won't pretend that didn't hurt. It did, deeply. But here's what the evidence showed. It showed that I was the one who drove him to every appointment. I was the one who signed the visitor logs at his doctor's office, month after month, year after year. I was the one who emailed his physician when his memory worsened. I was the one who asked about care facilities when I was afraid I couldn't do it alone anymore. Jared visited 9 times in 6 years. 9. I counted, because the sign-in sheet counted. My mother's visits were more frequent but shorter, always before lunch, never overnight. I was the one who slept on that old couch when he was scared. And when the judge reviewed the documents, when he saw the letters, when he matched the handwriting to other samples from my grandfather's files, when he read the words, "I want Eliza to have this house because she's the only one who stayed," he didn't doubt me anymore. The ruling came on a Thursday. The transfer was voided on the grounds of diminished capacity and undue influence. The property was returned to the estate, and under the terms of my grandfather's original will, the share that would have gone to my father was divided equally between Jared and me. But here's where it gets interesting. Jared, by that point, was facing civil penalties. His license was gone, his debts were mounting, he couldn't afford his half. He asked me to buy him out. I did. I paid him fair market value, not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted it to be clean. I wanted the deed in my name, free of any asterisk, any future claim, any whisper that I had taken something that wasn't mine. The house is mine now, the pale blue farmhouse on 3.5 acres. The one William Monroe built with his hands in 1967. I stood on that porch last week, and I thought about everything it took to get there. The years of caregiving, the silence, the signing of a document I didn't believe in because I was too tired to fight. The moment I almost walked away, and I realized something. They never asked me what I wanted. Not once. Not my mother, not Jared, not any of them. They assumed I would go along. They assumed I would smile and sign and disappear into the background of their story. And for a long time, I did. But not anymore. My mother and I don't speak now. Jared either. There was no dramatic confrontation. No screaming match. Just a slow, quiet severance. The kind that happens when people realize you're not going to play your role anymore. My Aunt Carol reached out a few months ago. She said she understood. She said she always thought something wasn't right about how that transfer happened. I don't know if I believe her, but I thanked her for saying it. I've started going through my grandfather's things. Slowly. There's no rush. The boxes in the attic, the tools in the shed, the photo albums he kept in the closet. I found a picture of him and my grandmother on their wedding day. They were standing in front of the house, just the frame and the foundation. Still under construction. She was laughing. He was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world. I put that picture on the mantel. Because the house isn't just mine now. It's theirs too. It always was. It just took a while for the paperwork to catch up. The house always had my name on it. They just couldn't see it until they lost it. If you've made it this far, thank you. This wasn't an easy story to tell, but it was mine, and I needed to tell it. Hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what part stayed with you the most. I know this one was heavy, and I appreciate you staying till the end. I'm gonna go sit on the porch now. The swing still creaks. I never fixed it. I don't think I will.